Today's conversation is going to be if you can get burnt out in your remote nursing job. And spoiler alert, the answer is absolutely. I am Emma. I am the founder of Nurse Fern. I've been running a remote nursing job board since 2020 with educational resources. Most of our materials are free, so please go ahead and check it out. Today, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on burnout in remote nursing, the causes, and some personal stories from our Nurse Fern community, along with how to spot a potential micromanagement role and what to do about it, how to evaluate it, and is it truly micromanagement? It's really important to acknowledge at the beginning of this video that one role that might be a terrible fit for you that you wouldn't touch with a 10-foot whatever could be another nurse's dream job. There is no black and white with remote nursing or even on-site nursing roles. We all know somebody who could never work in ER. Well, I loved being an ER nurse for a time, or wouldn't go into L&D, but you get the point. You might love something that another nurse can't stand. And as much as I have tried to narrow in throughout my years what roles are not great ones to promote on our site and other ones that I should, I often get asked to bring back positions that I think I wouldn't work. So why would I share them? Very long-winded way of just saying, don't yuck somebody else's yum. I hate that saying. Okay, we just need to move on. I also need to acknowledge that while remote nursing is often seen as this holy grail, this way to fully escape from bedside burnout and get into a new, refreshing, soft life career, spoiler alert, it doesn't always work out that way. And even if you land in a good role, you can never underestimate a potential nurse's ability to evaluate a situation incorrectly or just not really adjust well to the remote world. Or on the flip side, an employer's ability to fully shitify a good thing. We also have an ability as nurses to have massive amounts of hope core when it surrounds this idea that switching into a non-bedside or remote nursing job is going to solve all of our problems. There are two ways that most nurses experience burnout in remote roles in some way. And the first one, so number one, is simply picking a job that's not a good fit. This primarily happens when you know that you need a break from having direct patient interaction, or that you won't do well if you're on the phone all day with somebody and you end up in something like a telephonic triage role. This can work if it's a short-term goal to gain experience and move on. But if you know this is just not for you, do not do it. The second is if an employer misrepresents a position. This can happen if they tell you a position is going to be one thing and expectations are this, this, and this, and then you get into the role and things look way different than what you signed on for. Unfortunately, this can happen. So just a quick recap, remote nursing jobs can't always be the thing that fixes your life, which I think we all know deep down. We just really want it to. And most commonly, it happens from a wrong fit, perceived ideas that don't come to fruition, and bad employers or practices. The overall theme from our discussion and our communities leading up to me recording this video is that management plays an incredibly large role in whether you're going to enjoy your position or not. And a good manager can make a role that you might not have been interested in a really good thing because of the people you're with, while a bad manager can make a role that sounds awesome into a really bad situation. Often, management's effect on your happiness in a role has to do with micromanagement. Micromanagement, according to Merriam-Webster, is to manage, especially with excessive control or attention to details. And this is where things get a little bit tricky. Our perception of what micromanagement is might not match the perception of what your employer sees as being micromanaging. An employer might think that they're simply implementing smart monitoring techniques so that they know if you're actually doing your job throughout the day, while nurses could see it as having Big Brother breathing down your neck at all times. The question then becomes, when you switch into a remote nursing role, is our perception of micromanagement our perceived loss of autonomy from moving from a bedside level of supervision to a more Big Brother-esque digital version? Or are we truly being watched a little too closely? It is really easy to monitor somebody in a clinic or in a hospital to see if they're doing their job. You know if a nurse is taking care of their patients, if they showed up for work, and if things are getting charted and marked off in an EMR. When a nurse is working from home, we switch over to monitoring things like keystrokes, metrics, time and chart, mouse activity, activity status, things like that. And it can feel a little bit intrusive when you're not used to it. There is often an adjustment when you switch to a remote or a hybrid nursing role where you have to get used to this new level of monitoring. And it does, even when it's an appropriate level of making sure that you're doing your job, it can feel a little bit weird at first. It is really good to find out going into a role how monitoring happens and what you can expect from feedback and things like that. And we're going to go into that a little bit more really soon. If you're worried you're being micromanaged in your current remote nursing role or a future one, ask yourself what level of monitoring you're personally comfortable with and what would be taking it a little bit too far for you. That can help you assess if you're truly being micromanaged and supervised a little bit too closely, or if you're still in this adjustment period. Let's look at a few stories from previous and current remote nurses about what caused burnout and whether micromanagement was a factor. I think mine was a few of those factors. There was way too much micromanagement. I'm a full adult and an experienced nurse who felt like I couldn't even use the bathroom when I needed to. Paraphrasing here, but this wasn't an issue when I took care of 2 ICU patients for 13 hours in the hospital. Kind of blocked that micromanagement from my memory. I felt they also did a bait and switch because the interviews and the position was all about managing your patient caseload and doing patient calls, but they never talked about an inbound phone queue during the interviews until weeks in the training this was introduced. So yeah, baited into a phone queue position that also had scheduled outbound calls too. The metrics were quite unrealistic. Here's another story. I think the culture of the organization was great, so very minimal micromanaging, honestly. I worked in 3 different roles and all had a bit of a heavy workload for the pay. Case management was rough because calling members who have a lot of socioeconomic issues take out their struggles on you, and it's a lot. Utilization review was tough because caseloads were insane. The turnaround times added pressure, and of course, you're faced with some friction as the big bad insurer, giving not so great decisions sometimes. Being a quality analyst nurse had the most insane workload of them all. I was responsible for provider engagement across the entire organization, as well as participation in HEDIS and STAR outcomes. That job really sent me over the edge and put my burnout at top notch. If I hadn't been laid off from UR, I'd probably still be doing it because it was the most tolerable. Another nurse said, I didn't think it was possible, but yes, I got burned out and micromanaged from a remote triage job. You had to announce on the team chat when you were going to the restroom. You couldn't be 2 minutes late from your breaks. You were challenged if you took too long to document. If you didn't feel comfortable taking a certain call, you were told all nursing is the same. Just take the call, it's all the same. When I questioned the high turnover, I was told the nurses leaving were the problem, not any of the issues I already mentioned. It was a terrible place to work at, not to mention the pay was terrible. Some common themes with when nurses find a role to be intolerable definitely have to do with pay, micromanagement, workload, misrepresentation of a role, and really a misalignment with caregiving morals. So you could look at this almost as like a caregiver fatigue type thing, possibly, where I'm actually struggling for the words entirely for this. I know some of my better cohorts from like debriefing the front lines will have a better way of saying this. But as true caregivers, we need to know we're making a difference in patients' lives. And when we don't feel that we are, it definitely leads to a mismatch in our satisfaction in a role. Another nurse mentions a really good point here. Lack of socialization is another thing that's been getting to me. Being home all day, not able to make time for myself to leave much due to the need to be active online as a chart auditor. They've begun to micromanage, which is adding a bit to the stress. Nowhere near where I've seen others comment, but I fear that's coming. Another mention for autonomy, micromanagement, and then a new point being brought up by this nurse is that there's nowhere to rise to as well, which is discouraging as a younger nurse. We inherently like to gain more education, take on new skills, move into new areas where we expand our knowledge and often can mentor or help in new ways. And when we end up in roles where we have no movement anywhere, that can really add to dissatisfaction in your job as a nurse. Another quick comment, for me, it was fit. Took a phone position not realizing how introverted I truly was. Worried about clicking my mouse because I was told it counts idle time after 30 seconds of no clicks. Worried about making sure I have it on my calendar, change my status message, send email replies, and my queue is covered when I'm off or leave early. So we definitely just highlighted a bunch of personal stories and reasons for why nurses have felt micromanaged and led to burnout in a remote role. But on the flip side, as the person who runs Nurse Fern and talks to recruiters multiple times a week, one of their main concerns is nurses' ability to switch from a clinical on-site position into a remote role, and how there can be a mismatch there in their eyes with what nurses are expecting as workload. So we've got two sides going on here, and let's move into some suggestions I have to figure out if a job is going to be a good fit for you. In a remote job, you shouldn't work triage if you want to work in utilization review. They're both very different. Here are some things that you can do as a nurse to weed out and figure out which roles are best for you during the interview process. Ask good interview questions. Remember, in an interview, and you've probably heard this a million times, you are also interviewing the company, the job, the management. So here are a couple questions that I would ask depending on the situation and what information you've already received. What are the metrics for the role and how are they monitored? How will I be evaluated and receive feedback? What is my expected training schedule and when will I need to be able to meet production metrics? Is there overtime? Is it mandatory? Make sure you're targeted in your job search because you can get burnout too. You can already be burnt out in your clinical job and then get burnt out from applying for jobs. So make sure you're really targeted in the jobs that you are applying to and looking for so that you're not doing everything all at once and just really not having a plan. So definitely make a list of the companies that you want to work for and the types of jobs you want to apply to, and be relentless in only applying to the positions that you've identified as being a good fit for you. If you need some inspiration, we have a fun little remote nursing personality quiz on our website that you can take to help point you in a direction or see if what you want is truly something that you can attain. Because sometimes you'll get an answer that's more entrepreneurial and you're not really that type of person maybe. So it can help guide you there. We also have career guides on our site that are free to look at that outline the most common nursing jobs and include pros and cons in them. And if you need some inspiration for what job postings, companies, and job titles are, check out the archives on the Nurse Fern job board. If you have a free account, in your dashboard, you can look at our archives and you'll be able to see all of the past positions that we've posted through Nurse Fern. Here's a really hard one. You need to be willing to walk away. Now, this isn't as hard for me. As a person, I'm a quitter. If I am no longer having satisfaction or I feel like I need something new in a position, I will go find something else and I will leave what I've been in. But it can be hard if you've worked so hard for something like a remote job, especially in a climate like right now when there is a lot of competition and they really are really hard to get. But if it truly isn't serving you, even though you've attained what you thought you wanted, it's okay to move on. All right, so that rounds up our discussion about whether you can get burnt out in remote nursing. And there's a lot that goes into it about whether it is a perceived autonomy loss, true micromanagement, bad fit, whatever it may be, it does happen. And if you're experiencing it, you're not alone. Jump in our comments, ask me questions, check out the next videos. I am excited to be back in YouTube video production, and let me know if there's something you'd like to see from us here on our channel.